Hello, everyone. Hey, you know what? One of the advantages of coming early to meetings and being on time when they get started is you get to do things that the late people don't get to do. So we're going to do one of those things today. Wait a second. I'm just going to get ready here. Is that it's Canada Day. So there's no better way to start a Canada Day off than, is that straight? Is that straight? Okay. There's no better way to start a Canada Day off than with our national anthem. So thank you and congratulations. Thank you for coming on time and congratulations. And let's turn to the flag here and let's just like celebrate Canada before we get started today. Okay. Thanks for coming early. Well, happy Canada Day weekend, everyone, and welcome to the National Leadership Briefing. My name is Doug Sharp, and I will be your host for today. We are here in one of the greatest nations that has ever existed in the history of the world. We're very blessed to live here in Canada, and celebrating what Canada is just a key part of our existence here. I'm so excited to have the opportunity to be joining you this Canada Day weekend. Again, some people might say, Doug, but it's July the 2nd. It's the Canada Day weekend. You could have taken the weekend off. Why would I do that and miss this opportunity to be with you and spend time with you celebrating Canada Day, and also to acknowledge the fact that we live in critical times here in our nation. There are some very serious things going on out there, and there's an absolute ton of work to do on the road ahead. So missing an opportunity to get together is not something that we should do or can do, especially, like I say, with what we're facing these days. So on that note, I believe today's National Leadership Briefing is going to be the most important national leadership briefing that we have done so far. And we've been doing this for a few years now. So I'm telling you right now, this is such a critical moment in time and such an important national leadership briefing. I encourage you to hear what it is that we're going to be covering today and make sure you share it with others, inviting them to come on the next national leadership briefing as well. And then especially come on for the next national leadership briefing as well, because I want to just mention to you that as important as today's briefing is, the second most important briefing, I believe, for us as people of faith who care about vulnerable people who live in our communities, you really want to be here for the August National Leadership Briefing. I'm going to tell you why at the end of the briefing today, because we're going to intro the next briefing at the end of this briefing today, and you're going to see why it is that you're going to want to make sure everybody that you know that cares about vulnerable people is on that next National Leadership Briefing. Okay, so lots to cover today, but let's take a look at what's coming up today. This is, again, information you're not going to want to miss. You're going to want to share this information. So I will make sure that I do everything I can as well to hit that mark right at the top of the hour. When we actually get to the top of the hour again, we're going to make sure that we end the briefing on time, 1 hour. I'm committed to that. I'll get you out of here in exactly that time. Now, to kick things off, we're going to kick off with an answer period segment today. Unlike the House of Commons, where they have question period, where oftentimes you sit there and you watch question period in the House of Commons and you go, wait a second, there's a lot of questions, but I'm not hearing the answers to these questions. Well, we have something called answer period here on the National Leadership Briefing, where we provide you with answers, and they're often answers to questions that I'm asked today. I have a special guest segment, somebody that asked me a few questions. I'm going to share that with you, and it's actually going to serve, that answer period segment is going to serve as the foundation for everything that we're going to look at today today, and I'm going to explain that to you during that segment as well. Okay, so answer period first, then it's a tradition in my home and in our business here in Canada to celebrate the story of Canada Day and where Canada Day itself, the name came from. And just kind of like, the night before Christmas story that you read at Christmas time, this is a tradition in our home and in our business to tell this story. So I'm going to share a little story time with you on where Canada Day came from. And it might not be the story you might be expecting. It's a little bit, for people who aren't aware of this, it's a little bit surprising, but I'm going to share that with you today. Then we're going to roll into what I'm referring today as a pace of change exercise. Just to show you the pace of how quickly things can change here in Canada, I want to give you a quick illustration as to why we need to be vigilant when we start seeing people try to restructure or reframe our nation, why we need to pay attention to some of these subtle moves that are being made at the legislative level, especially because they can really turn Canada hard. And if we don't pay attention to what's happening, we can seriously see some significant changes that will impact the outcome of the well-being of our neighbors and, of course, our nation. And we're also going to then, we're going to be launching today something kind of exciting because we have training and teaching templates that we use and make available on the National Leadership Briefing site. Today, I'm going to be launching a brand new training and teaching template that you're going to have available to you for download so that you can share some of the principles with other people that we cover here on the National Leadership Briefing. So you can put the tools in your own hands, but I'm going to show you a new template today that we're going to be using on the road ahead. And then I'm going to share details of that August 6th briefing, as I say, that's so important for us to understand on the road ahead. Now, in and amongst everything that I've just said, there's going to be some surprises along the way. So stick around right to the end, but let's get started here for now. And first, let's cover what we always want to cover first, and that is why we get together and what it is that we rally around here on the National Leadership Briefing. We want to start there. We have a lot of new people on the briefing, as always, every time, because the briefing grows when you invite people to join us for the next briefing. We're always telling you to look around your sphere of influence. Take a look at you're the center of a sphere of influence, and you know lots of people that share your views and values, and why not add their voice to ours as we rally around the things that we believe in? Well, for those of you that are new today on the National Leadership Briefing, I welcome you, and I thank you so much for considering adding your voice to ours. I hope by the end of the briefing today that you are convinced that you need to be a part of this. You need to add your voice to ours so we can advance the things that we believe in into society, culture, politics, and government. And what are those things? Well, of course, they're the 4 pillars. Now, the 4 pillars are a downloadable story that you can find on the National Leadership Briefing, which tells you where those pillars come from. However, I'm going to tell you quickly what the 4 pillars are right now. First of all, we rally around here on the National Leadership Briefing a common belief that parents have the right to raise their children the way they want. So we look at legislation, we talk to politicians, we talk to new candidates, we talk to our neighbor over the fence, and we are always working to advance this understanding that for us, especially as people of faith here in Canada, that raising our children with the same values and in the same faith tradition as perhaps we were raised is important to us as parents, and we want that right to raise our kids protected and preserved. The second pillar is that we value greatly our right of belief and freedom of religion, and those we elect to serve us in civil government must respect and defend that right of belief and freedom of religion. That is a minimum requirement for anybody that we consider as elected representatives at all levels of government, whether it's federal representatives, provincial members of the legislative assemblies, whether it's our municipal government leaders or school board trustees. We want them to respect and defend, rise in defense of our right of belief and freedom of religion when it is attacked. So that's the second pillar. Now, the third pillar, very important to us in the faith community, is that we have an expectation that the laws and policies of civil government provides for the safety and security of the citizens, especially the vulnerable that live among us in our communities. Our heart for the vulnerable is a priority. So therefore, any piece of legislation and any policy must first check the box of being safe for vulnerable people that live among us in our communities. And of course, the fourth pillar, which is a really, really easy one for everyone to rally around, and that is that it is inappropriate for civil government to heap debt upon the backs of our children and future generations. So those that are elected to serve us in civil government should be able to respond immediately when we say, what plan are you executing right now to lift the burden of debt off of the backs of my kids and my grandkids? That's super important to us. And so we want to make sure that people aren't just talking about the idea of lifting the burden of debt off of their backs, but we want to know what they're actively doing and the plan that they're working to do just that. So those are the four pillars. If you believe in those four things and you're here for the first time today and you're wondering what it is that we're doing here, those are the things that we rally around, and you can add your voice to ours as we look to on the horizon in society, culture, politics, and government for ways that we can advance these principles in legislative choices, in candidate choices. We can make all sorts of decisions out there to advance where we can put people in places to advance these in politics, or we can just help ourselves communicate effectively on what it is that our priorities are. Our priorities are the vulnerable. How do you express that? We go over all of that here on the National Leadership Briefing, and we're certainly glad that you're here with us doing the same thing. So thank you so much for letting me share the four pillars with you again. We have it on the website. You can download the story. There's always the four-pillar story in the post-briefing notes that you're going to be receiving today. So look to that post-briefing notes, find that four-pillar story, become familiar with it, and tell other people the story as well, so that you can invite them to join us for the next National Leadership Briefing. All right, moving on to the answer period segment for today, and let's roll right into the agenda and make sure that we stay right on time so we can finish up at the top of the hour. Thanks so much for your time, and this is the answer period segment for today.
Well, here at Faytene TV, one of our passions is to mobilize you and all of us together to build a better Canada for the future. And I can think of very few people in the nation that is better at this equipping than the man you're looking at right now, Doug Sharp. Thanks for joining me today.
Good to be with you, Faytene.
So it's Canada Day week. We got about 3 minutes here, Doug. I want to talk about 3 things that Canadians who love this nation can do to build a better Canada for the future.
You couldn't ask at a better time for me because like a lot of people look at New Year's Eve and their New Year's Day and they say this is a new time to start new things and stuff. I go, no, Canada Day. That's my day to sort of take a look at the road ahead and make my commitments for the year ahead. So here I've got 3 things for everybody. I think it's going to be kind of interesting on the road ahead for us as people of faith here in Canada, especially in the realms of politics and government. So my very first item that I'm encouraging people to do on the road ahead this year is to walk as they are called. Stay in your own lane and understand why you're in that lane and understand the authority you have, where you're at and why you're there, and know the responsibility that you have, and then navigate from there. That's really important, that you're in the right place, because we're going to call on you in that place at some point in time to mobilize you. The second thing is that we really think it's a good idea to look to people around us, no matter who they are in our sphere of influence, and celebrate where they're at in their places. There's a lot of people out there that are operating in different political parties with different calls on their lives and things, and we should not just accept them or tolerate them. We need to celebrate them. Don't let anything divide us, especially when it comes to people that have and share our views and values. And then finally, the last thing, the third thing, is to pray for discernment, to know what is the difference between right and wrong. I believe there's going to be a lot of gray pitched out there to us on the road ahead. And you and I both know, Faytene, that gray is not gray, it's wrong. Right and wrong are 2 different things with a pretty clear line between them. And so what I'm saying to everybody is pray for discernment, because as they try to sow confusion into our camp, as mainstream media, for example, tries to deceive us with all the noise instead of the signal that we need in life, we need to know clearly what is right and wrong so that we can navigate on the road ahead. So those are the three things: stay in your lane, celebrate other people in their lane, and number three, pray for discernment to know the difference between right and wrong.
Amazing, Doug. Those are some good admonitions. And I also want to give one more admonition here, and that's stay connected with this guy right here. He's got a monthly call called the National Leadership Briefing, where he's constantly giving valuable information, has incredible guests on. It's a Zoom call you can join in with. Go to nlbcanada.ca, get registered for that, and stay connected with one of Canada's finest, one of Canada's sharpest pencils, Doug Sharp.
Well, that, of course, is the one and only Faytene of Faytene TV and My Canada. I am going to make sure that you have a way of connecting with Faytene. Her organization, My Canada, provides incredibly sound and accurate updates as to what is moving through the House of Commons, gives you advantages that you might not have as far as timely response to different things that are going on in the House of Commons. I really encourage you to get connected to her and her organization. So following up on one of the things that Faytene and I were talking about, she said, Doug, we got 3 minutes. Give me 3 things. What's most important? Well, those 3 things I really do believe are important on the road ahead. And this is why. First of all, why should you be where you are called to be? Well, I believe that it's most important that you are where you're supposed to be because you are a center of influence. You serve in a sphere of authority and have authority to act and responsibility within a sphere of authority. And that influence that you have there is what we are going to call upon when it comes time to advance the principles of the 4 pillars. So we let you stay where you're at. That's really important because that is where you have the influence. That is where you have the authority. And we serve you there. We deliver the product to you on the National Leadership Briefing. And we don't want you to go running out on, say, political battlefield. If you are a pastor, we want you to stay a pastor. If you are a teacher, stay a teacher. If you're a mother, stay a mother, and so on. But make sure that you connect and add your voice to ours as we all look for those opportunities to advance with a unified voice the principles that we believe in. Now, you're going to be advancing them in your sphere of influence, though, not mine. We all are working in our own areas here, just coming together once a month, winking a nod. This is what we believe in. Let's remind ourselves of that, what connects us, what binds us together, and then we all go back out to where we're called to serve. That's why the first point is so important. The second point, why should we celebrate everyone else where they're at? Well, there is a very, very active campaign. I just wanted to make sure if you didn't know about it already, to have those that do not share our worldview very much want to see us divided. They very much want to see us running around, looking at each other, seeing all the differences in each other. And that's why we emphasize the importance of focusing on the things that unify us and setting aside the things that divide us. One of the things that they've been most successful at lately is dividing us in the political realm. We have a lot of different people working in different political parties. Now, that's okay in itself. As a matter of fact, remember, I just said, called to serve and serve where you're called. This is important. If you are called to be in the People's Party of Canada, if you are called to be in the Liberal Party of Canada or the Conservative Party of Canada, that is fantastic because that is where you have influence. That is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about we shouldn't be just I guess, arguing with each other in our own ranks about the things that they put in front of us to argue about. So let's stay unified and celebrate each other. I'm going to celebrate you wherever you are. You can celebrate me wherever my opportunities to have influence are on my side. Now, the third point here, why is it that we would pray for discernment to know what is right and what is wrong? And that is because just like recently in our recent past, and I think it's going to intensify in the future, it is going to be harder and harder for us to secure good information about what is true and what is right, and obviously so we can determine what is right and wrong. This seeking of truth is what we need to be focused on the road ahead, because mainstream media, big tech, governments that do not want to see us unified and come together. These are all different organizations and groups that are really, really trying to make it hard as it can be for us to see the truth in the noise. And what we want to do, of course, is we always want to carve through it and make sure we get right down to what is true and what is right so that we can pursue that. So this is my encouragement on the road ahead. And it also serves as the foundation for the rest of the briefing today, because I'm going to reference that again. Now, I did tell you that we were going to go into story time though right away, and that's what we're going to jump on right now. This story is the story of where Canada came from. Of course, it's Canada Day weekend, and we celebrate Happy Canada Day weekend, and we do it by telling the story of where the name came from. Now, it was over a quarter a century ago. This was back in 1982 on July the 9th. It was 4 o'clock, and in the House of Commons, only 13 members of Parliament had wandered into the chamber, which held 282 members of Parliament. So there was a very, very small number of members of Parliament present. And at that moment, one of the members of Parliament said, hey, this might be an opportunity to advance a piece of legislation, because we've got some conservative members of Parliament that are kind of coming in late. So what they did was they had brought up Bill C-201. Now, this is a bill that was called an Act to Amend the Holidays Act. This bill was intended to change the name from Dominion Day, which had been celebrated since the beginning on July the 1st, to Canada Day. Now, this bill had been languishing in the House of Commons for 2 years before this bill got called up on this particular day. And there had been 30 attempts from 1946 to 1982 to change it before. But this particular day, when there was only 13 members in the House of Commons, they seized the opportunity, and Deputy Speaker Lloyd Francis called the bill up and ran it straight through the parliamentary process right to third reading. Now, what's interesting about that particular moment in time is that if you're familiar with the parliamentary process, it can take some time to move a bill through to third reading in the House of Commons. Well, on this particular day, because of the opportunity that was created with so few members of Parliament in the House, it only took 5 minutes. That's right, 5 minutes. Now, once it got into the Senate, Ernest Manning, that's Preston Manning's father, noted, this is kind of interesting that we're so quickly moving through something that could have such a significant impact on our nation, to change the name from Dominion Day to Canada Day, especially when there's no public uproar. There were no campaigns going on. The people weren't like in the streets with placards going, change the name, change the name. This was just a group of parliamentarians who seized the opportunity to move a bill along that up until that point had no public support for it. So Ernest Manning was concerned about it, and so too was Senator Ann Bell. Once the bill landed in the Senate, it was quite concerning to her, because she said just before the bill was passed, received royal assent, and became law, and the name was officially changed, she said in a speech that we have a political concept of our nation, we have a geographical concept, but I am afraid we are losing the spiritual concept of Canada. And of course, because she knew and was very concerned, she knew the origins of the word Dominion and where it came from, and that it was in fact Sir Leonard Tilley who came up. It was one morning, he was perusing his Bible, and he came across the 8th verse of the 72nd Psalm, where it read, "He shall have dominion also from sea to sea, and from the river until the ends of the earth." And so the British North America Act of 1867 sets out how, and this is what the quote says, "The provinces of Canada, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick shall form and be one dominion under the name of Canada." Now, this is where the name came from for Dominion Day, and that is where Canada Day came from. So you can now take that story and share it in your story time at Canada Day in the future, because I'm going to include that story in the post-briefing notes for you, so you have all the details of where the Canada Day name came from. Now, that was just an incremental change. That was just one small change. And I told you earlier on that we were going to talk about the pace of change and go through an exercise quickly just to identify how things can change in our nation incrementally in small chunks, and have big impacts at the end. So we're going to take a look at one of those changes right after this quick break. And then I'm going to move through this process because I want you to be able to, in the future, we're going to take a serious look at these small changes, like things like bills that go through the House of Commons. How does that affect us when we've got these small bills? They might not seem important to us, but as they go through the House of Commons, they do make a big change if they're part of a greater plan to move our nation into a very different direction than our founders intended. So we'll watch this quick video and then come back and we'll do a quick pace of change exercise and keep it moving from there. Thanks so much for your time. Back in a minute. These are the things that we believe in. First, that parents have the right to raise their children the way they want. Second, that those we elect to serve us in civil government must respect and defend our right of belief and freedom of religion. Number three, that the laws and policies of civil government must provide for the safety and security of the citizens, especially the vulnerable among us. And number four, that it is inappropriate to heap debt upon the backs of our children and future generations. They came from you. They're your pillars. Well, let's talk about the pace of change now. Things are moving quite quickly here in Canada. I'm sure many of you also feel somewhat overwhelmed at times that things are changing so quickly, it's hard to keep up. But sometimes things change quietly, they change slowly, they change incrementally. And when you take a look at the cumulative effect of these changes that we don't hear about, sometimes they can have a massive impact on the direction our nation goes and the eventual destination, where it is that some people want us to end up. And I'm using today an example to illustrate this of two documents. Now, these two documents are framed and in my office. One of them hangs behind my desk. Sometimes actually I change them around. So right now it's the Canadian Bill of Rights that hangs behind my desk. And the other document is the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Now, there is another one that's framed on the wall on the other side, and we keep those in our office for a reason, because it reminds us as to how the priorities of the individuals in government can change. Let me give you an example. In the Canadian Bill of Rights, or Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, pardon me, there is something at the very top here that is called the preamble. Now, the preamble is a prefacing statement that is made before it gets into the body of the document. Now, on the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, we often celebrate the preamble because it says, quote, "Whereas Canada is founded upon principles that recognize the supremacy of God and the rule of law." Now, that is something to celebrate, the supremacy of God and the rule of law. Two very good things, very good things. Now, this document was put in place. This became a part enshrined in our Constitution in 1982 by Pierre Elliott Trudeau, Prime Minister at the time. And this Charter of Rights and Freedoms is a document that is part of our founding document now officially. But it was preceded, by another document, which was the document over my shoulder. That is the Canadian Bill of Rights, which was a piece of legislation that was passed in the House of Commons in 1960 by the Diefenbaker government. Now, that document also had a preamble on it as well, that prefacing statement before it gets into the body of the document, which describes the rights. Now, I'm going to include both of these documents in the post-briefing notes today, because I encourage you to do some homework with these two documents. Hold them side by side. It's quite amazing the differences between them. For example, the preamble of that document goes into greater detail about the supremacy of God and the rule of law. In fact, in that document, it says in the prefacing statement, "The Parliament of Canada, affirming that Canadian nation is founded upon principles that acknowledge the supremacy of God," same as the other document. It also goes on to say, "We also recognize the dignity and worth of the human person and the position of the family in society, of free men and free institutions." Now, these days, you can see that that is not a priority of government. You do not see people talking about in government, in this particular government, I should say, we do not see the dignity and worth of the human person and the position of the family in society being discussed at all. It also goes on in this document over my shoulder from 1960, the Diefenbaker government, that it says that also affirming that men and institutions remain free only when freedom is founded upon respect for moral and spiritual values and the rule of law. So you see, there's a big difference between the assertion that's made in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms of 1982, recognizing the supremacy of God and the rule of law, and now we're looking at moral and spiritual values and the rule of law. Very, very different perspective. And that is within one generation that change was made. So the pace of change might be incremental. It might not seem like a big difference at the time, but when you start removing things like the position of family in society, and you start removing the acknowledgement that there is such a thing as moral and spiritual values, this can cause a big and have a big impact over time, and it definitely is not going to be a positive one when it's managed the way it was. So I wanted to use that as an example today. Please study the document, that the two documents side by side. And I'm going to actually give you a bit of a homework assignment, because this part of it is super interesting, is that in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms here on the bottom, where it has Pierre Elliott Trudeau's signature here, the prime minister at the time when documents like this are produced, the prime minister always gets to put whatever he wants over the top of his signature here. It's a statement that is in his words, in the word of the prime minister, what they want to say. Do some homework, and I'm not going to tell you what it is, but read what it says over top of Pierre Elliott Trudeau's signature, and then read back in 1960 what it says over Prime Minister Diefenbaker's signature. So you can see from 1960 to 1982 what is on the mind of the Prime Minister. And it's very interesting, and I hope that you do take me up on that. Now, thank you for your letting me share that pace of change exercise with you. It's really important, especially lately, because we have been getting creamed with change lately in the House of Commons. We have had changes to the euthanasia legislation, which have removed safeguards for, and so vulnerable people are at greater risk, something we care about as people who want to advance the third pillar of protecting the vulnerable. We've seen that change to the euthanasia legislation. We have seen bills like the conversion therapy bill that actually placed members of the LGBTQ community at greater risk because it is limiting healthcare choices from them. We've seen that go through the House of Commons. We've seen Bill C-10 go through the House of Commons. We've also had Bill C-233 that has been voted down in the House of Commons. And that is a bill, let me just read it for you here. It would just simply make it an offense for a medical practitioner to perform an abortion knowing that the abortionist sought solely on the grounds of the child's genetic sex. So if there's a baby girl in the womb, to perform an abortion solely on the fact that she's a girl would be now under that would be banned. But parliamentarians voted no against that legislation. So we've been getting creamed out there. There's been a lot of change that has been coming at us, and some of it you may not think is important, but it is important. Now I'm going to take a look at specifically at one particular change that is in discussion right now, and that is a bill that went through the House of Commons, Bill C-10. And I have a special guest with me today, Garnett Genuis, and Garnett is a member of Parliament in the House of Commons with the Conservative Party of Canada, and he is going to just give us an answer to one very simple question, and here it is. Well, thanks so much for joining us, Garnett. It's really important that citizens in Canada understand Bill C-10, and I just have one question for you today. Why should we be, as citizens, so concerned and paying attention to Bill C-10 at this time?
Well, Doug, thank you so much for the opportunity. Bill C-10 is a very dangerous piece of legislation because in the name of advancing Canadian content and arts and culture, it gives the CRTC, which is the kind of broadcast regulator, very expansive powers to make regulations about the kind of content that people will see on social media, impacting social media algorithms to elevate certain content, to reduce the visibility of certain kinds of content. And this is a fundamental threat to freedom of speech. It might not limit your or my ability to speak, but it limits our ability to be heard. So people may still, at a certain size and scale, you'd actually have to register with the CRTC, below that threshold, you could still post whatever you wanted, but the government would be reaching in through the regulation of algorithms to say we're going to make these kinds of posts more visible and these kinds of posts less visible. And the bill speaks to these powers in order to increase the presence of quote unquote Canadian content, but also various diversity criteria, increasing representation of certain groups over others. And so this is some people might be sympathetic to those aspirations, others maybe less so, but the bottom line is this gives expansive power to government to say this is the kind of content we want to see more of, and this is the kind of content we want to see less of. And it's very insidious in that you might still be posting your content, you might still be going online and saying the same things you've been saying in the past, but suddenly fewer people are seeing it, and it's because some regulator has influenced the creation of an algorithm that says your kind of content is going to be seen less than others, and you don't know about it. You can't control it. You're still posting that content, but it's not being seen. And this is an inappropriate space for government to be interfering in. People should have the right to express their opinions, and it should be up to those who are seeing that information to be interested in it or not, and to select for that content or not. And once government has this power, this raises big concerns for those who are involved in all kinds of issues or forms of advocacy that might not be deemed politically correct or might not be favored by the powers that be within the government or the CRTC. So it really weakens the voice of those with new ideas, ideas that are not considered in vogue in our time and place.
Oh, well, thanks so much for just letting us know about this bill, because we've been getting a lot of questions about it, and people are really looking for a way to communicate to their members of parliament about their concerns. I know that you and your colleagues in the Conservative caucus have been standing firm against this piece of legislation, so I appreciate for you for doing that. Please pass on our gratitude, and because it appears that you are alone in the House of Commons and in the Senate, your colleagues in the Senate.
Yes. Yeah, very, very true. The other parties are all sort of supportive in principle of this. The Liberals and the Bloc have pushed to shut down debate, limit debate in Parliament on a bill that's going to limit debate online. And the NDP, they haven't been with the Liberals on all the procedural wranglings, but they've supported them on the principle of this bill, unfortunately. So it really is Conservatives standing alone here.
Thank you so much for your time today, Garnett. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Doug.
Well, there you have it. It's a perspective of Garnett Genuis, Conservative Party of Canada Member of Parliament. And thank you so much again, Garnett, for joining us today. Now, there are other perspectives, as was noted during our conversation, perspectives from other parties. And in fact, Garnett mentioned that it appears as though the Conservative Party of Canada stood alone in the House of Commons in opposition to this government overreach, and that the Bloc Québécois, the NDP caucus, and the Liberal government, they are in fact in support of the bill, and quite perplexed that not everyone is in support of this particular piece of legislation. So we're going to share with you an exchange now between a Liberal member of Parliament and another Conservative member of Parliament on why it is that the Conservative members of Parliament wouldn't support this bill. And let's see what the Conservative Party member of Parliament has to say here.
The honourable member for Kingston and the Islands.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, so if one is to believe what the member is saying, and that this bill is only intended for the Prime Minister to be able to sit there and pull some levers and control who gets to see what, how can he explain the fact that the Bloc, the NDP, and the Green Party all support it? I mean, like, if what he's saying is actually correct, why is virtually every MP in here except the Conservatives supporting this? Have they suddenly decided to go along with this grand plan that the member is suggesting through his borderline conspiracy theories?
Well, member for Carleton.
Why do the Bloc, the NDP, and the Liberals all support the bill? It's simple. They're all the same. They're all the same. They all believe in putting the state above the citizen. That's the core of their ideology. They believe in worshiping at the altar of the state, that big government should decide and that the people should just follow. All of them bought into that notion. Well, they've always believed it, but they saw, in the words of the finance minister, a political opportunity in COVID.
Exactly.
A political opportunity that saw the Prime Minister attempt to give himself the power to raise any tax to any level without parliamentary approval for 2 years after the beginning of the COVID pandemic. They attempted to grab unprecedented spending powers, and yes, they've now tried to grab away people's freedom of expression. All the leftist authoritarian parties believe in that ideology, and that's exactly why they support this bill. That is the easiest question I will ever answer in this place.
Questions?
Now, I chose that particular clip because it raises an interesting series of questions that perhaps were not at the forefront of the conversation in our minds already. When Mr. Poilievre brought up the question of one party that holds the state above the citizen, or that big government should have the power to decide and that the citizens should just follow when it comes to freedom of expression issues like what you post on social media or what conversations you want to have online. This is really something that we definitely want to understand. We want to understand the truth about pieces of legislation like this, because in the future, as we get further down the future, these little incremental changes, these small changes, as we were talking about, they can be merged with other changes, small changes, and take us to a very dangerous place where even conversations like the ones that we're having here on the National Leadership Briefing once a month would be limited or perhaps even possibly curtailed because the government did not feel that it was appropriate to allow things like this to exist online. So this is a very, very interesting conversation that's going on right now. And I'm obviously going to update you ongoingly as to exactly where this goes in the future. But one thing I want to tell you we're going to do for you as well today is we're going to, in the post-briefing notes, put a bonus clip. We've never done this before, but I want to do it for today. And I want to remind you of the foundation of what we placed the briefing on today. We placed the briefing on today respect for other people who are operating in different spheres of authority and who are serving in other areas, and acknowledging and respecting and celebrating them, people who are advancing the principles of the four pillars. I want to remind you of that because this might be a bit of a divisive issue. This might be divisive that I'm about to do this, but I very much believe that this is an important piece of information to share. So in the post-briefing notes today, I am going to be sharing a piece, it's a review of a piece of legislation that is coming, and you're going to find out more and more about it, and it's called Bill C-36. Now, Bill C-36 is a continuation of the government's plan to suppress conversations that really, quite honestly, your freedom of expression in all kinds of ways. And this particular piece of this social media piece was produced by Rebel Media, and it was produced by Ezra Levant specifically. Now, I have known Ezra Levant for years and years, and I know very well that he's a bit of a lightning rod for attention, and sometimes he gets some negative attention from the community that I serve, and sometimes there's some controversy. But you know, one thing that I can tell you about Ezra Levant, and I'm here to tell you that I know him quite well, is that he was a defender of Christians in Canada and Christian principles in Canada from the very first day that I met him. I met him 20 years ago, and the very first time I saw him and was sitting in a room, I'd never even heard of the guy before, and I listened to him talk about defending Christian principles in the public square. And so this is a man who I've known for a long time, and he has given a very interesting perspective on a new piece of legislation that follows up Bill C-10 that I am going to include as a link in the post-briefing notes today, because when you see the incremental changes that the Liberal government has been making, and then you link it to legislation that is coming or that we're going to be hearing about, you're going to see that there is definitely a roadmap that is being followed that takes us to a very, very bad and dark place in Canada that involves a lot of government overreach and very little public and free expression. So I'm happy to share that with you. I just don't want to get you all wild-eyed and light your hair on fire because you see something from Rebel Media here on the National Leadership Briefing. I very much appreciate so much of what Ezra does and the people at Rebel Media that I'm happy to share it with you today. So anyway, we're going to move on now to the break and then come right back. And I want to walk back with you to the home stretch because we are going to talk about the next National Leadership Briefing on August 6th. And I am going to share information with you that you are going to probably be surprised by. And I hope that it moves you to take action and join us in the August briefing, and bring as many people as you possibly can to that briefing, because it speaks to the protection of vulnerable citizens here in Canada. So watch this quick video and we'll be right back and head on down the home stretch. Bye for now.
It's time to wake up from our slumber
and stand together, united as one. One family, one body, one church.
We will not walk past the vulnerable.
Say nothing, do nothing, and turn a blind eye.
We are citizens of a great nation.
We are good Samaritans to our neighbors. You are not alone.
We are the largest unified voice in Canada. So we stand united. This is our rally cry. We are Christ to our nation. This is our battle cry. He shall have dominion from sea to sea, and from the river unto the ends of the earth. Righteousness will reign. Justice will prevail. We are united.
Okay, we are on the home stretch of the Canada Day weekend national leadership briefing. Thank you so much for your attention to this point. This is probably, though, the most important part of the briefing today. Now, it's all important. There's always so much information, but remember that everything we've covered here today, I want you to look to the post-briefing notes, because I'm going to go over quite a bit of information in the next few minutes as we wind things up. And I want to make sure that you realize that everything that I'm referring to, you're going to find again in the email that you receive at the end of the day. Now, when you're registered for the National Leadership Briefing, we ask you, if you can, join us for the time of the briefing. But if you're unable to attend and you're registered and you have registered yourself and your own personal email address, you will receive by the end of the day post-briefing notes for everything we discuss. So if you're just watching this online on our YouTube channel or whatever, you still need to go to nlbcanada.ca. That's nlbcanada.ca, and click on the registration link and make sure you're registered to receive all the post-briefing notes yourself at the end of each briefing each month. You'll also receive a link to remind you about the briefing, and so that you'll be able to access that meeting right away. And again, like I say, the August 6th briefing is oh so important, and we're going to talk about that in just a second here. Now, first, I want to preface that with reminding you about how we set up the issue review segments and how we mobilize and activate people here on the National Leadership Briefing. Our goal here is to ensure that we're providing you resource and resource people, so that when you identify something that you want to take action on, you have the activated information, you have good current information, and you have people there to help you. Let me give you some examples as to some of the things we've done for you already in the past. First of all, the Citizen Action Group Ministries. Now, we've encouraged that all churches have in their churches Citizen Action Group Ministries, or CAG ministries. Now, starting those ministries is something that's a little tricky. I mean, if you're just coming from a place of having no understanding or no connection as to how it is to use a ministry like that to help connect you to the issues that are happening in your local governments or provincial governments or federal governments, to how to connect your church to that and to become aware of that, what we encourage you to do is allow us to serve you here on the National Leadership Briefing. But we also have identified for you a church that you can take a look at and observe and watch how they're doing it, so you can get some tips and tricks from them. Now, the church that we've identified and is on our website is Craig's Church, Pastor Craig's Church. And that church is a church that has an active Citizen Action Group ministry, and you can plug right in by getting on their email list and watching how it is that they communicate to their church family about the issues of the day. By watching them and watching how it is that they interact with their church family can help you interact with your church family. So look in the post-briefing notes today, and I'm going to provide those links again for you, just to remind you that Pastor Craig is standing by and his team to help you establish your own by watching how they do it. We also had a resource person by the name of Leanne. School boards are so important across the nation, and we have the opportunity in Canada as citizens to participate and run for office. We can actually become school board trustees. We can also support school board trustee candidates that want to run, people that represent our views and values. Things like respecting a parent's right to raise their children the way they want, recognizing and supporting our right of belief and freedom of religion, and of course, protecting the vulnerable. Things like that, we have the opportunity to see manifest in school boards across the nation. So we provide you a contact person by the name of Leanne, who has opened her heart. She is an elected school board trustee, and she has a heart for helping people get started. If they want to run, if you know somebody that wants to run, if you yourself wants to be a school board trustee, we provide you with those resources. That's another person right off the top. Now, we've also had other people that we brought on to the National Leadership Briefing, such as people like Kathy Peters, who is a anti-human trafficking educator. Now, she works with law enforcement, police departments, municipal councils. She briefs people, she trains people. She's got a wealth of information, and she got me started on really seeing what the potential was for us and the kind of impact that you and I could have together as a National Leadership Briefing family in the realm of dealing with these challenges of human trafficking here in Canada. So let me tell you, this is the home stretch message right here. This is where we start, is I'm going to tell you about an initiative that's coming up here on the National Leadership Briefing, and that is the initiative based on us as a group of people addressing the challenges and risks to vulnerable citizens here in Canada that are posed by human trafficking. Now, you might say, Doug, I don't know anything about human trafficking, and I don't necessarily have a heart for it because I don't know anything about it. So what I'm going to do here today is I'm going to give you some information about human trafficking here in Canada, and I'm going to encourage you to take specific action in the days ahead that lead up to the next National Leadership Briefing, which is on August the 6th. So first, let's take a look at human trafficking, the issue of human trafficking. And I'm going to include this information in the post-briefing notes, so you have a copy of it. First of all, human trafficking for the purpose of prostitution is the fastest growing crime in the world, in the entire world. Human trafficking, by its definition, just to be clear, is the recruiting, transporting, transferring, receiving, holding, concealing, harboring, or exercising control over a person for the purpose of exploiting them. So the key word here is exploitation. It's really modern day slavery. That's what we're talking about. So let me give you some facts about prostitution and sex trafficking here in Canada. Okay, so here's some data, and we're going to provide the sources for it as well, so you'll have confidence that this is coming from credible sources. First of all, 13 years old is the average age of recruitment into the sex industry here in Canada. It's much younger, in fact, for Indigenous girls. In the Lower Mainland here in Canada, in British Columbia, the target age is actually 10 to 12 years old for girls. COVID, of course, has made it much worse, as they've noted, and traffickers are proving to be very organized and sophisticated in executing their strategies. Now, the sex industry itself in Canada is made up of 54% Indigenous individuals. They are severely overrepresented, and that number is much higher, as it turns out, in urban centers. In fact, what we believe we're looking at here, the people that I'm working with, is that we're looking at an actual worst case scenario of systemic racism in Canada. Now, the information that I'm sharing with you here now, it has been reported to me that this information was also shared with the BC Indigenous Chiefs and the Federal Minister of Justice, David Lametti. Now, they were told that at the very least, Indigenous women and girls who are in the sex industry, they wanted, at the very least, they wanted forensic nurses to help them, and they wanted rape kits to be made available. So you can imagine what kind of an environment that they're being forced to live in. We also have a statistic here that says that 82% of the individuals involved in prostitution had experienced child sexual abuse or incest, which proved to be preparation for them to enter the prostitution industry later. Now, 72% of these individuals live with complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, the term complex post-traumatic stress disorder is the worst form of trauma that a human being can experience. So if you are talking about a group of individuals in our society, vulnerable citizens experiencing the worst kind of trauma that can be experienced by a human being, we have an opportunity to do something about it here coming up. So just stay with me. 95% of those individuals in prostitution want to leave. That is a statistic. It's not a choice. We've got to get this out of the head that this is a choice, and it's certainly not a job, and it's not work. So 86% of the individuals who are involved in prostitution have unmet housing needs, and 82% of those individuals need drug rehabilitation. 84% of the prostituted persons are pimped out or trafficked themselves. They've been trafficked themselves. So this is definitely a protection issue. It's a vulnerable persons issue. It definitely is something that we should be focusing on. And so this is what we're going to be doing between now and August. I'm leaving you with an encouragement here today for you to look to the August 6th National Leadership Briefing Day. That's the first Friday in August. We're always on the first Friday of August. We're always for 1 hour only. Look at that day as an opportunity where you can bring people to the National Leadership Briefing who have a heart for the vulnerable in your church, who want to establish in your church a special task force for anti-human trafficking, knowledge and initiatives to raise awareness and help advance this information into the public square. We on our end are going to, for the next National Leadership Briefing, we're going to bring you people who are activated within this realm, within the anti-human trafficking world here in Canada, and we're going to be introducing them to you one right after another. We're going to be bringing Kathy Peters back. We're going to be bringing people who are on the front lines, who are rescuing people right out of this terrible world, and you're going to be able to receive this information firsthand and fuel the action that you can take at the local level in anti-human trafficking initiatives. Now you might say, Doug, this sounds like it's pretty big, and I don't know if this is, as a church, this sounds like it's kind of complex, and it sounds like there might be some danger. I'm going to make a commitment to you right now. If you look at this as an opportunity to help vulnerable persons and just take the next step with me, which is showing up on August the 6th with your friends who have a heart for vulnerable persons, I promise you, as I said in the beginning of the presentation and the National Leadership Briefing today, I promise you that I will not take you from where you are called to serve. I will leave you there. That is where you need to be. You need to stay frontline in your community. If you're a pastor, you're a pastor. If you're somebody that's working within the church in another ministry, but if you have a heart for the vulnerable, please show up and allow me to share this information with you and encourage you to take that next step of establishing an anti-human trafficking task force right in your church. Now, this is something that we're going to walk with you. You don't need to be an expert today to make the decision, but you can make the decision to show up and be there for the next National Leadership Briefing, when we're going to focus in our entire time on vulnerable persons. Now, we also have another initiative that we're going to be sharing with you at that same time, but I'm going to spare you the details of that to a midweek touch point later on this month. But for now, please, if you are on the call today and your pastor, as you know, isn't on the briefing at all, then go to your pastor and let them know. Share this video with him and say there is an initiative that's going to be launching on August the 6th. It's something that we can participate in locally. Let's just have a look at it. And I encourage you, please, if you're a pastor, please encourage those who have a heart to protect the vulnerable to join you as well in the next National Leadership Briefing. Well, I hope that's helpful for you today. I thank you so much for your time. It has been such a blessing today to celebrate Canada Day with you, to share this information with you, and to begin the summer months by identifying very, very, very important issues that we should be focusing on. And remember, there's still so much that we need to do in the fall, because we might be staring down the throat of a fall election as well. But if we all come together and we all speak with a unified voice to the things that we believe in, then we'll have a much more effective way on the road ahead. So thank you so much for your time today. I look forward to seeing you on the midweek touch points. And until next time, God bless you, God bless your family, and may God continue to bless this great nation of Canada. Bye for now.